The fourth day of protests began in St. Louis today over the acquittal of an ex-cop by the name of Jason Stockley. Now, Jason Stockley was a cop who shot and killed a 24-year-old by the name of Anthony Lamar Smith back in 2011. And it all occurred when there was a high-speed pursuit following suspicions that Lamar Smith was engaged in a drug deal. After there was a crash as a result of that high-speed pursuit, the cop, Stockley, was heard saying that he was going to, quote, kill this motherfucker. And then he proceeded to get out of the police car and shoot and kill Lamar Smith. Now, that cop has been acquitted. He opted for the type of trial where a judge gets to make the decision, and the judge decided that Jason Stockley wasn't necessarily guilty of what he was charged with, which was murder. Now, of course, people wanted to respond to that, and there were a number of peaceful protesters who took to the streets to do that. But unfortunately, a select few decided to get violent, and that is what is making headlines today. So let's take a quick look at the CNN report, and I'll fill in the blanks.
Someone tried to break the window here, and as you walk down, you can see another glass that was shattered here. We saw someone picking up large objects and trying to throw them into the window. Now, if you look back this direction, you can see the flower pots they turned over. And what they did was they tried to pick up these pieces and throw them into the windows as well. We've watched police officers all night trying to chase down some of the suspects. We know they made a few arrests, but right now everyone's on edge about what's going on, what they see in the streets. Now, this is after a day of peaceful protests where we saw people marching for miles and miles with no issues, but all of a sudden, late at night, once again, this is exactly what happens. A small group will start running through the city and creating issues.
It's so frustrating because it doesn't matter how peaceful the protests were during the day. It doesn't matter how much those protesters followed the law and just wanted to practice their First Amendment rights of, protesting the outcome of this case. All of the attention is on the select few who decided to get violent and destroy and vandalize property after nightfall. Now, more than 80 people were arrested late Sunday as protesters attacked police. They broke windows and flipped over trash cans. Again, this is not representative of all the protesters. It is a small group of people who decided to unfortunately get violent. And again, all of the attention is focused on that. Also, according to multiple reports, including that of St. Louis Post-Dispatch photographer Dave Carson, officers chanted, "Whose streets? Our streets," after making arrests Sunday night. Carson also tweeted that among the arrestees was Post-Dispatch journalist Mike Fault. Carson claims that these were mass arrests and said that people complained that they were given no way to exit. So they were told to disperse, and it was difficult to do so. And as a result, since they couldn't disperse, they were victim to mass arrests, at least according to one of the photojournalists that was there. So it's just like the situations that happen in Berkeley when a conservative speaker shows up. If you want to protest the speaker, fine, but understand that people who get violent and who cause trouble you lose the moral high ground,
sure.
And whatever political message you're trying to spread, unfortunately gets hindered or destroyed by the select few who decide to get violent. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah, I applaud the activism, and activism is something that I think we've lost sight of in this country. I mean, anti-war activism was in short supply before we got into Iraq. I think the kind of activism when it comes to these situations that arise all too frequently when a white cop is acquitted of violence to a black citizen who's been pulled over, and oftentimes these end up in sort of lethal confrontations. Activism is needed, but as Anna says, this activism that borders on violence and that, of course, does spill over into violence, it seems almost inevitably into violence, that only hurts the cause. Ferguson, which it's weird, Ferguson happened after this incident happened, even though this judgment came down after Ferguson, if you will.
Right.
So chronologically, they're sort of reversed. But Ferguson was one of those situations where you had all these people taking to the street, and there was violence, and there was, as I recall, and this is very high profile, you remember all the networks were on it, and the disbursement of that crowd was something that really became the focus of the story. Now, that situation had video associated with it, I feel, which maybe got people to sort of refocus on the facts. But I think the facts here are getting lost in what you're talking about, which is the violence that spills over from the activists protesting to begin with.
Right, exactly. And every report that I've read says that during the day, the protests were largely peaceful. There were no issues whatsoever. At night, all of a sudden, a small group comes in and they cause all these problems. They vandalize, storefronts. It's just so incredibly stupid. It's so stupid. And who knows who they are? Are they provocateurs? Are they people who actually believe in, the political statement that's being shared during these protests? Are they just people who are looking for trouble and so they're, co-opting this? I don't know, but what I do know is that it's incredibly counterproductive and incredibly frustrating because we all know what the media is like, okay? The media latches onto the drama, the sensational stuff. They don't care about a political message. They don't care about people who want to speak truth to power. They're actively against people who speak truth to power, which is why it's so incredibly important to do anything and everything you can to not let these protests devolve into this type of violence.
Yeah, even that live shot that we saw from CNN focused on a planter that was turned over on its side. I mean, really? I mean, I can't even imagine you having sold that as a location where you were going to do your report with a straight face. Oh yeah, take me live from the planter that's broken. I mean, again, now, obviously there was a storefront that had been damaged, as Anna says, and again, these store owners have nothing to do with this police violence, if that's what you're concerned with. I think it is just people who are out for the mayhem of it. I mean, that high that comes from just destroying shit, and
it's just so dumb. It's incredibly dumb.
It undermines the entire process, but they're not really concerned with the process to begin with. Those who are, generally speaking, part of this.
Right. And, this is somewhat different, but also related. Ben Shapiro was going to go speak at Berkeley. I believe he did speak at Berkeley. And the headlines prior to his speaking engagement were embarrassing. They were so embarrassing. Berkeley braces for Ben Shapiro. Berkeley shouldn't have to brace for Ben Shapiro, okay? I don't agree with Ben Shapiro on a number of things, but it doesn't matter if I agree with him or not. He should be able to go onto a college campus, a federally funded public college campus, and speak and share ideas. And instead of trying to meet speakers that you disagree with violence, and a lot of the protesters don't. They just want to protest, right? But for those who do want to use violence to protest, instead of doing that, which is incredibly counterproductive and makes you look foolish, why not share opposing views, right? Invite a different speaker on to share his or her point of view on a similar issue that Ben Shapiro is discussing. It's supposed to be a free marketplace of ideas. Just because you don't like the idea doesn't mean that it gives you a warrant to be violent. Again, those who just want to peacefully protest, I hear you, fine. I think it's much more effective to just ignore it, instead of doing what people like Ben Shapiro and Ann Coulter want, which is the attention, right?
Right. Of course, it's counterproductive. I mean, that's a great example of where it's just counterproductive. You bring all this attention now to these speakers, and you make it sort of a hot ticket, if you want to think of it that way.
They love it. Why do you think they keep wanting to go to Berkeley to speak? You think it's an accident? You think it's a coincidence? No.
And they love to point to the liberals who are so free speech, who won't let them now speak openly at, as Anna says, a state-funded university, and how that the price of security has gone way up and how they need personal security. It lets them pursue the narrative that they want to tell. And so it hurts and undermines the cause across the board.
If you like this video, you probably like independent media. The best way to support independent media, become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.